She arrived at the cafe early that morning, the sun just beginning to rise and paint the streets with a soft orange glow. The air was cool, and there was a quiet peace that always seemed to exist before the rush. She adjusted her apron, took a deep breath, and reminded herself that today, like every day, she had work to do and responsibilities to meet. Her hands, though tired from years of hard work, were steady and practiced. She knew the cafe, its tables, its smells, and its rhythm. Every corner of the place felt familiar, as if it had grown around her, welcoming her as one of its own. She had been working here for a few years now. Not because she loved the job, it was hard, tiring, and often thankless, but because it was a way to survive. She sent money home to her family, helped cover bills, and did her best to make sure her younger siblings could continue their studies. Every day, she carried the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, but she never complained. That was just how life was for her. She had dreams, of course, but for now, survival and responsibility came first. The cafe slowly began to fill as the morning progressed. Regular customers came in, some nodding and greeting, others too wrapped up in their own world to notice. She moved quickly between tables, taking orders, refilling coffee, and balancing trays with practiced ease. It was always a delicate dance, keeping multiple orders straight while trying to maintain a smile. Her boss watched from the counter, his eyes sharp and critical. He had a way of making even the smallest mistake feel monumental. When he spoke, his words carried weight, and often a sting. He didn't believe in gentle corrections. Everything was public, and she had learned to endure his sharp tongue and cold looks. On this particular morning, she noticed him frowning at a corner table. She approached, trying to anticipate his dissatisfaction before it was voiced. "Good morning," she said politely, her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. "Can I get your usual coffee ready while you take a seat?" He looked up briefly, nodded, and she hurried off to the counter to prepare his order. It was a simple routine, one she could do with her eyes closed, but the tension never truly left her. Every action, every step, every move felt measured, because she knew he was watching, and if he didn't approve, she would hear about it. The weight of his scrutiny was constant, but she had learned to push it aside, focusing on the work and the people she served instead. As the morning rush began, the cafe became a blur of activity. Orders flew in, phones rang, and the smell of fresh pastries mixed with the strong aroma of coffee. She moved like a dancer, swift and precise, never dropping a cup or forgetting an order. She smiled at customers, reassured children who spilled their drinks, and gently reminded those who lingered too long that the cafe was busy. It was exhausting work, but she did it because she cared not just about her job, but about the people she served. Her boss, however, never seemed to notice the care she put into her work. He was quick to point out flaws, to criticize her in front of others, and to make her feel small. Today was no different. As she carried a tray of fresh pastries to a table, she heard his voice behind her, sharp and cutting. "Watch how you hold that tray. You'll spill if you're not careful." "I don't know why I even bother reminding you." She felt her cheeks flush, the familiar mix of embarrassment and frustration rising in her chest. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had learned to nod politely and move on, to let his words slide off her like water. But each comment added weight to the burden she already carried. Despite this, she found small moments of joy in her work. A customer complimenting the latte art she had perfected, a child giggling as she carefully balanced a plate of cookies, a colleague giving her a brief smile of solidarity. These small moments reminded her why she kept going, why she endured the harsh words and scrutiny. They reminded her that she was capable, that she had skill, and that she was more than the sum of her boss's criticisms. During a brief lull, she stepped outside for a moment, letting the cool morning air wash over her. She closed her eyes, feeling the sun on her face, and allowed herself a few seconds to breathe. She thought about her family, about the sacrifices she made every day, and about the quiet dreams she held in her heart. Dreams of a life where she was respected, where her hard work was acknowledged, where she could stand tall without fear of being belittled. But those dreams felt far away, distant and fragile, yet they gave her a reason to keep moving forward. When she returned inside, the rush had begun again. Orders were coming in faster now, and she moved from table to table. Tray to tray, smile on her face, and determination in her heart. Her boss continued to watch, his eyes critical, but she held her ground. She made mistakes, yes, but she corrected them quickly and gracefully, never letting them define her. She learned to anticipate the needs of the cafe, to notice the small details others might miss, and to provide a level of care that made customers come back day after day as the morning wore on. She noticed a new customer sitting at a corner table looking around with curiosity. She approached, offering a warm smile. "Good morning. Can I get you something to drink?" The customer looked up, surprised by her friendliness, and nodded. She took the order, carefully preparing the drink, and brought it to the table with a practiced flourish. The customer smiled, clearly appreciating the effort, and she felt a small surge of pride. This was why she did what she did. These moments of connection, of making someone's day a little brighter, made the long hours and harsh words bearable. The tension with her boss reached a small peak when he called her over to the counter. "You're too slow this morning. Why can't you keep up like the others?" he snapped, his voice cutting through the din of the cafe. She felt the familiar sting of shame, but forced herself to respond calmly. "I'm keeping up, sir. If there's a specific area you'd like me to improve, I'd be happy to hear it." He stared at her, momentarily taken aback by her composed response, before turning away. She felt a small flicker of satisfaction. It was not victory, but it was something. A small act of standing her ground in the face of constant criticism. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. She continued to work, balancing trays, taking orders, and offering genuine smiles to the customers. She endured the occasional sharp remark from her boss, but each one felt a little less heavy, each one a little less capable of breaking her spirit. She was learning, slowly, that her worth was not defined by his words, but by her actions, her skill, and her heart. By the time the lunch rush began, she was exhausted, but there was a sense of quiet pride within her. She had survived another morning, another wave of criticism, and another series of challenges. She had handled it with grace, skill, and determination. And though the boss still looked down on her, she began to realize that his opinion did not have the power to diminish her. She had control over herself, over her work, and over the respect she earned from those around her. As the cafe buzzed with activity, she moved from table to table, helping customers, supporting colleagues, and doing her best to make the day run smoothly. She knew there would be more challenges, more moments of criticism, and more times when she would feel small. But she also knew that she was capable, resilient, and strong. And for the first time in a long while, she allowed herself a small smile, a glimmer of hope that one day, her courage and determination would be recognized, and she would no longer have to endure the constant belittling. The morning ended. The rush faded, and the cafe settled into a quieter rhythm. She wiped down tables, refilled condiments, and prepared for the next wave of customers. Her hands were tired, her feet sore, but her spirit felt a little lighter. She had faced another day, survived another round of harsh words, and continued to do her best. And in that, she found a quiet strength, a determination that no criticism could take away. She knew that the journey ahead would not be easy. But for now, she had survived, and that was enough. The next day, she arrived at the cafe with the same routine. The streets quiet, and the air crisp with the promise of another long day. She adjusted her apron, wiped her hands, and braced herself for the familiar tension that awaited inside. Even though mornings had become easier in some ways, the weight of anticipation still lingered. She knew her boss would find something to criticize, and yet she had learned to push forward. Holding her head high as she moved through her day, the cafe slowly began to fill, and she moved from table to table, taking orders with practiced ease. She greeted familiar faces, remembered the special requests of regulars, and offered a smile to newcomers. Her feet ached, her arms tired from balancing trays, but she never let her fatigue show. Every interaction mattered. Every small gesture of care she offered to a customer felt like a quiet victory, a reminder that she could rise above the constant criticism that shadowed her work, her boss, As usual, observed from behind the counter, his eyes sharp and calculating. There was no warmth in his gaze, only scrutiny. She felt it every time she passed him, a subtle weight pressing on her chest. He had a way of making even small mistakes feel catastrophic. Today, however, she felt a sense of quiet determination. She was tired of the constant belittling of the way he seemed to take pleasure in undermining her. She was beginning to realize that enduring it quietly was no longer enough. She had to find a way to stand up for herself. During the mid-morning rush, a spill occurred at a crowded table. A child had knocked over a cup of juice, and the liquid spread quickly across the table and onto the floor. She rushed over, quickly grabbing napkins and a cloth to clean the mess. The parents watched anxiously, and she reassured them with a calm, steady voice. Just as she was finishing, her boss appeared, glaring at her. "What are you doing? That table should have been handled faster," he barked, his voice carrying across the cafe. Customers glanced up, some frowning, others uncomfortable. She felt the familiar sting of humiliation, her cheeks warming with embarrassment. But instead of retreating, she took a deep breath and met his gaze. "I handled it as quickly as I could, sir," she said quietly but firmly. "The parents are satisfied, and the spill is cleaned." Her words were simple, but there was a confidence in her tone that startled even herself. Her boss stared at her, his mouth opening and closing as if searching for a reply, before muttering something under his breath and walking away. A small wave of relief washed over her. It was not victory, but it was a start. She returned to her tasks, moving between tables with renewed focus. Customers noticed the change in her demeanor, the way she carried herself despite the constant pressure. Some offered smiles of encouragement, recognizing her quiet strength. For the first time, she realized that her confidence was something she could cultivate, something that no amount of criticism could take away. As the day continued, she found herself faced with another challenge. A regular customer, known for being demanding, arrived with a large group. They placed multiple orders at once, each with specific preferences and requests. She felt the familiar pang of anxiety knowing that any mistake would be magnified under her boss's watchful eye. But she took a deep breath, focused, and moved with precision. She repeated orders back to ensure accuracy, carefully balanced trays, delivered everything with a smile. Her boss, seeing her handle the situation without error, could not hide his surprise. He muttered something under his breath, but she did not let it distract her. She had realized that her boss's opinion did not define her worth. What mattered was her own skill, her own effort, and the respect she earned from those around her. This realization gave her a quiet strength, steady determination that fueled her through the rest of the day. During a brief lull, she took a moment to step outside, letting the cool air fill her lungs. She watched the street, the people passing by, and the soft glow of the sun as it climbed higher into the sky. She thought about her family, about the sacrifices she had made, and about the dreams she held in her heart. These were not grand dreams, but they were hers. A life where she could be respected, where her hard work was acknowledged, and where she could stand tall without fear of humiliation. When she returned inside, the lunch rush began. Orders came in faster than she could process, and the cafe became a whirlwind of activity. She moved swiftly, taking orders, balancing trays, and serving with care. Her boss hovered nearby, occasionally snapping at her for minor mistakes. Each comment still stung, but she felt a growing resilience within her. She was beginning to understand that endurance alone was not enough. She had to stand firm, assert herself, and show that she was capable and deserving of respect. A particularly tense moment came when a coworker accidentally dropped a tray near the counter. Drink spilled, and the sound drew the attention of several customers. Her boss immediately began shouting, pointing fingers, and blaming the staff. She stepped in, quickly helping to clean up the mess, calming the coworker, and addressing the customers with a warm, apologetic smile. Her calm response contrasted sharply with her boss's anger, and customers seemed to appreciate her composure. For a moment, the dynamic of the cafe shifted, and she felt a sense of quiet pride in her ability to handle the situation gracefully. As the day wore on, The tension between her and her boss reached a subtle peak. He continued to monitor her, looking for faults, but she continued to meet his scrutiny with quiet confidence. She had realized that her reactions were under her control. She could choose to be intimidated, or she could choose to rise above. And with each choice to rise above, her confidence grew, and the power her boss held over her began to weaken. Toward the end of her shift, she faced a particularly challenging customer. An elderly woman, frustrated with the long wait, raised her voice and demanded immediate service. The boss, already in a foul mood, stepped in, ready to assign blame. She took a deep breath, approached the table, and spoke in a calm, respectful voice. "I understand your frustration, ma'am. I will take care of your order immediately and make sure it is exactly how you like it." She handled the situation with patience, listening carefully to the woman's preferences and delivering the order with precision. By the time she returned to the counter, the woman was smiling, satisfied, and complimentary. Her boss watched, expression unreadable, but she felt the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. The day ended with a moment of reflection. She sat for a brief moment behind the counter, sipping a glass of water and letting her thoughts wander. She thought about how far she had come, about the small victories she had achieved, about the strength she had discovered within herself. She realized that while the boss might continue to criticize, his words no longer had the power to define her. Her worth was her own, and she could stand tall and confident, regardless of his opinion. As she cleaned up the cafe and prepared to leave, she felt a sense of quiet determination. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new moments of tension, and new opportunities to stand up for herself. But she knew now that she was capable, resilient, and strong. She had begun to fight back, not with anger or confrontation, but with calm confidence and unwavering dedication. And for the first time, she felt that her efforts were beginning to make a difference. Not just in the eyes of her customers, but in her own heart. Walking home, she reflected on the day, feeling a mixture of exhaustion and empowerment. The struggle was far from over, but she had faced it head-on, learned from it, discovered a strength she did not know she possessed. And as she stepped into the quiet evening, she allowed herself a small smile, a glimmer of hope that one day, her courage and perseverance would transform her life, and she would no longer have to endure the constant belittling. For now, she had survived another day, and that was more than enough. The following morning, she arrived at the cafe with a new sense of purpose. The sun had just begun to rise, painting the streets with soft light, and she felt a small spark of hope as she adjusted her apron. The cafe was quiet as she entered, the familiar smells of coffee and pastries greeting her like old friends. She had learned to start her day with intention, reminding herself that she was capable, strong, and deserving of respect. The morning began much like any other. She moved between tables, taking orders, carrying trays, and greeting customers with a warm smile. The regulars nodded in recognition, and new customers seemed to appreciate the careful attention she gave them. Her boss watched from the counter as always, but this time she felt less burdened by his presence. The sting of his words no longer had the power to shake her. She had begun to understand that her worth was not tied to his opinion, but to her own efforts and the care she offered. Midway through the morning, a customer complained about a drink. It was a minor issue, the coffee slightly cooler than desired. But the woman raised her voice, drawing attention from nearby tables. Her boss moved quickly, ready to scold, but she stepped forward before he could speak. "I apologize for the inconvenience," she said calmly. "I will make a fresh drink for you right away, and I promise it will be perfect." She quickly prepared the coffee, carefully following the customer's instructions, and returned with a smile. The woman's expression softened, and she nodded in appreciation. Her boss watched, frowning, as she handled the situation with grace and efficiency. She felt a small thrill of satisfaction. For the first time, she realized that her actions spoke louder than his words. Throughout the day, she began to assert herself in subtle ways. When her boss criticized her in front of others, she responded calmly, defending her actions with clarity and composure. She did not argue or raise her voice. Instead, she explained her perspective and took responsibility where necessary. Each time she did this, a small shift occurred. Her coworkers began to notice her confidence and dedication, and some even offered quiet support. Customers, too, seemed to sense the change, treating her with a little more warmth and respect. A particularly challenging moment came during a busy lunch rush. Orders poured in faster than she could process, and the cafe became a whirlwind of activity. She moved quickly, taking orders, delivering food, and managing spills and complaints with practiced ease. Her boss hovered nearby, his critical gaze sharper than ever. He snapped at a coworker for a minor mistake, and she intervened. Helping to resolve the issue without escalating tension, she spoke quietly but firmly, guiding her coworker and reassuring the customer. The situation calmed, and the customers were satisfied. Her boss stared, momentarily speechless. She had managed to control the chaos with composure and skill. As the day continued, she found herself increasingly standing up for herself. A coworker accidentally dropped a tray of drinks. Her boss immediately began to yell, pointing fingers and blaming her team. She stepped in, taking control of the situation with calm authority. She reassured the customers, cleaned the mess, and guided her coworkers to handle the aftermath efficiently. Her boss's attempts to undermine her had no effect. She had learned to maintain her composure, to focus on solutions rather than blame, and to protect both her team and the customers. By mid-afternoon, the cafe had begun to quiet down, and she took a brief moment to rest, sipping water and observing the room. She reflected on the morning, realizing how far she had come. The fear and anxiety that once plagued her interactions with her boss were diminishing. Each time she stood her ground, she gained confidence and control over her own actions. She began to see herself not as a victim of circumstances, but as someone capable of navigating challenges with intelligence and grace. Her growing confidence did not go unnoticed. A regular customer, who often watched the dynamics of the cafe with interest, approached her during a quiet moment. "You handled that lunch rush beautifully," they said. "I've been coming here for years, and I've never seen anyone manage it so well. You really know what you're doing." She felt a flush of pride and thanked the customer quietly. Compliments like this, though small, reinforced her belief in her own abilities and gave her strength to continue standing up for herself. Later, a new challenge arose when a large group of tourists arrived, each with specific dietary needs and requests. She calmly took their orders, repeating them to ensure accuracy, and prepared the drinks and meals with care. Her coworkers, noticing her calm efficiency, followed her lead. The group left satisfied, complimenting her professionalism. Even her boss could not hide his begrudging respect, though he said nothing. She felt a quiet triumph. It was a moment that demonstrated her ability to manage difficult situations without fear or hesitation. As the afternoon wore on, she continued to build her confidence. She began to notice small shifts in the cafe's atmosphere. Her coworkers seemed more willing to listen to her suggestions. Customers were more respectful, and even her boss appeared to measure his criticisms more carefully. She realized that her consistent calm and competence was gradually changing the environment around her. She was no longer just surviving the cafe. She was beginning to influence it in positive ways. A particularly memorable moment came when a difficult customer tried to provoke her with a rude comment. In the past, she might have been shaken, but this time, she remained composed. She responded with polite firmness, addressing the customer's concern without engaging in conflict. The customer, surprised by her calmness and professionalism, apologized quietly and left satisfied. She felt a surge of pride, recognizing that she had grown stronger not through confrontation, but through control, intelligence, and self-respect. By the end of her shift, she felt exhausted, but empowered. The challenges of the day had been significant, yet she had faced them with courage and grace. She had learned that standing up for herself did not require anger or defiance. It required calm confidence, clear communication, and unwavering dedication. Her boss had begun to notice, even if he did not openly acknowledge it. Her coworkers had started to see her as a leader, someone capable of managing chaos with intelligence and poise. Walking home, She reflected on the day with a mixture of fatigue and satisfaction. She had faced criticism, managed difficult customers, and supported her team, all while maintaining her composure. Each challenge had strengthened her resolve, and she felt a growing sense of empowerment. She realized that her journey was far from over, but she was no longer the same person who had entered the cafe that morning. She had begun to fight back, not with anger, with confidence and skill. That night, she lay in bed thinking about the day, replaying moments of triumph and challenges she had overcome. She understood that the road ahead would still have obstacles, but she felt ready to face them. She had discovered a strength within herself that she had not known existed, a quiet resilience that would guide her through future challenges. And as she drifted off to sleep, she felt a sense of hope, knowing that her courage and determination were beginning to shape not just her work, but her life. The morning began like any other, with the streets quiet and the soft golden light of the sun casting long shadows on the pavement. She walked into the cafe, her steps steady despite the lingering exhaustion from the previous day. Her apron felt heavier this morning, not from the fabric, but from the weight of anticipation. She knew the day would be full of challenges, full of the sharp criticisms from her boss, yet she carried a quiet determination with her. Today she decided she would not let anyone diminish her. The cafe smelled of fresh coffee and baked goods, the familiar aroma comforting as she took in the empty tables and polished counters. She took a deep breath and began her routine, setting up the coffee station, checking pastries, and arranging tables. The first few customers trickled in, and she greeted each one with warmth. Taking their orders and remembering the little preferences that regulars had, she moved through the cafe like she had a rhythm, each step practiced and careful, each gesture thoughtful and precise. Even though her boss watched, his eyes sharp, she felt less pressure than before. She had discovered something powerful. Her work spoke for itself. Mid-morning brought a flurry of activity. A group of office workers arrived, placing complicated orders for coffee and sandwiches. She jotted down their preferences carefully, double-checking every detail to avoid mistakes. As she prepared their food, she noticed her boss standing at the counter, frowning and muttering to himself. His presence could have been intimidating, but today she felt a calm resolve. She focused on her tasks, letting her skill and attention to detail shine. A challenge soon presented itself. A customer complained that their order was incorrect, raising their voice and drawing attention from nearby tables. Her boss started to intervene, his expression tight and critical, ready to blame her for the issue. She stepped forward before he could speak. "I apologize for the mistake," she said gently. "Let me fix it for you right away, and I will make sure it's exactly how you want it." She moved quickly, carefully preparing the order, and returned with a smile. The customer's frown softened into a nod of appreciation. Her boss watched silently, unable to interject. In that moment, she realized the power of calm confidence. She had stood her ground without confrontation. The result had been successful. The pace of the cafe picked up as more customers arrived. She moved between tables, balancing trays, taking orders, and managing spills with skill and patience. Her boss occasionally barked instructions or criticisms, but she had learned to respond not with fear, but with quiet competence. She corrected minor mistakes without hesitation and guided coworkers with gentle authority. They began to notice her composure, and a few even offered small smiles of support. It was as if a subtle shift had begun. Her presence was no longer overshadowed by fear, but marked by capability. During a particularly hectic moment, a large family arrived, placing multiple orders at once. She felt the familiar pang of anxiety but refused to let it take hold. She repeated their orders carefully, ensuring no detail was missed, and coordinated with the kitchen staff to get everything prepared promptly. As she delivered the trays, balancing each one expertly, she caught her boss's eyes. He looked surprised, almost unsettled by her efficiency. It was a small victory, but it reinforced the growing confidence she felt within herself. A new challenge emerged when a coworker accidentally spilled a tray of drinks near the counter. Her boss immediately began to shout, blaming the staff for the mishap. She intervened, speaking in a calm, firm voice. She reassured the customers, cleaned up the mess, and helped her coworker recover from the embarrassment. Her composed handling of the situation contrasted sharply with the boss's anger. Customers who had witnessed the scene nodded appreciatively, and her coworker looked at her with gratitude. She realized that her ability to stay calm under pressure not only helped her, but also protected those around her. Throughout the day, she noticed small changes in the cafe's atmosphere. Coworkers began to listen more closely to her suggestions, and customers treated her with greater respect. Even her boss seemed to measure his criticism in less harshly than before. She understood that her consistent calm and competence was influencing those around her, changing the dynamic of the cafe in subtle but meaningful ways. The lunch rush brought another test. Orders were coming in rapidly, each one complex and specific. She moved with focus and precision, coordinating the team and ensuring that every tray and plate was delivered correctly. One particularly demanding customer attempted to provoke her with a rude remark. In the past, she might have been shaken, but today she remained composed. She addressed the concern politely, ensured the order was corrected, and the customer left satisfied. It was a quiet triumph, a reminder that she could control her responses and maintain her dignity. By mid-afternoon, exhaustion began to creep in, but she refused to let it show. She continued her work, balancing the demands of customers, coworkers, and her boss with unwavering focus. She began to notice moments of encouragement, a regular customer complimenting her efficiency, a coworker quietly acknowledging her guidance, a small nod of approval from someone who had witnessed her handling of the lunch rush. These moments reinforced her sense of self-worth and strengthened her resolve. Toward the end of her shift, a particularly challenging customer interaction tested her once more. An elderly man was confused about his order, frustrated and raising his voice. Her boss stepped forward, ready to take over, but she intervened. She spoke with patience and kindness, explaining the details of the order and ensuring it was corrected. The man's expression softened, and he thanked her with a sincere smile. Her boss watched, expression unreadable, but she felt a quiet satisfaction. Her actions had not only solved the problem, but it also demonstrated her capability and poise. As the cafe quieted and the last customers left, she took a moment to reflect. She felt tired, yes, but also empowered. The challenges of the day had been numerous, yet she had faced each one with grace and competence. She had learned that standing up for herself did not require anger or defiance. It required calm confidence, clear communication, and a steady sense of purpose. She had begun to influence the cafe's environment, earning respect quietly through her actions rather than demanding it. Walking home, she reflected on the day, replaying moments of challenge and triumph. She understood that her journey was far from over, that her boss's criticisms would not vanish overnight, and that difficult situations would continue to arise. But she felt ready. She had discovered a strength within herself, a quiet resilience that would guide her through future challenges. Her confidence had grown, her abilities were recognized, and her presence commanded a subtle authority that others respected. That night, as she lay in bed, she thought about the day and the progress she had made. She had faced criticism, managed difficult customers, and supported her coworkers, all while maintaining her composure and dignity. She realized that her growth was not just about standing up to her boss, but about discovering her own power, her own value, and her own strength. And as she drifted off to sleep, she allowed herself a small smile, a glimmer of hope that the days ahead would bring new opportunities for her courage and determination to shine. Even brighter, the morning sun poured gently into the cafe, warming the polished floors and the familiar smell of coffee and baked goods. She walked in with a calm determination, adjusting her apron and taking a deep breath. The air held a quiet promise, and she felt ready to face whatever the day would bring. The cafe was already buzzing as early customers took their usual seats, some nodding and greeting, others focused on their morning routines. She moved among them gracefully, taking orders, refilling drinks, and offering smiles that carried a quiet warmth. The boss was at the counter as usual, observing every move. But today, something felt different. She could sense a subtle shift, though the tension was still there. Over the past weeks, she had stood her ground, handled difficult customers with patience, guided coworkers with quiet authority, and demonstrated her skill and dedication in countless small but significant ways. The boss's sharpness had dulled slightly, replaced by a cautious watchfulness. She knew it would take more than a few successful days for him to acknowledge her. But she was ready. The morning began with the usual flow of orders. She moved seamlessly between tables, balancing trays, remembering special requests, and offering attentive service. She had learned to anticipate the needs of customers, noticing when someone needed a refill before they asked, or when a child needed a clean napkin. Each gesture was thoughtful, precise, and made with care. The customers noticed some offering compliments or smiles, and she felt a quiet sense of pride. This was her element, and she had grown confident in it. A challenging moment came when a large group entered, placing a mix of complicated orders. She felt the familiar pang of stress, but she refused to let it overwhelm her. She repeated each order carefully, made notes to ensure accuracy, and coordinated with the kitchen efficiently. Her coworkers followed her lead, inspired by her calm competence. The boss watched silently, perhaps realizing that her ability to handle such situations was remarkable. She delivered each tray with a steady hand and a warm smile, and the group left satisfied, complimenting her professionalism. A small victory, yet a powerful one. Throughout the day, she continued to assert herself in subtle but meaningful ways. When minor mistakes occurred, she addressed them calmly and constructively, never letting anger or frustration dictate her actions. She guided coworkers patiently, offering tips and support without condescension. Customers who were initially frustrated often left with smiles, reassured by her attentiveness and care. Each interaction reinforced her growing confidence and sense of control. Mid-afternoon brought an unexpected challenge. A regular customer had a sudden medical issue, feeling faint and dizzy. Panic began to ripple among the nearby patrons, and her boss looked uncertain, unsure of how to handle the situation. She moved quickly, supporting the customer, guiding them to a chair, and calling for help discreetly. She remained calm and reassuring, speaking gently while taking practical steps to ensure the customer's safety. The emergency passed without incident, and the customer thanked her sincerely. Coworkers looked at her with admiration, and even the boss's expression softened. It was clear that her actions had earned respect, though he did not voice it aloud. As the day went on, she continued to demonstrate quiet authority. She balanced multiple tasks, managed challenging customers, and supported her team, all while maintaining composure. Her confidence radiated, creating an environment of calm efficiency in the cafe. She realized that her consistent efforts were transforming the workplace, inspiring others through example rather than force. She had become a subtle leader, someone who influenced without demanding attention, who guided without asserting dominance. Another defining moment came when a customer loudly criticized a meal, threatening to leave. Her boss moved to intervene, but she calmly approached the table. She listened patiently, apologized sincerely, and offered a solution that satisfied the customer. Her careful handling diffused the tension, and the customer left with appreciation instead of anger. Her boss watched, clearly taken aback by her composure and skill. This was not just a minor success. It was a demonstration of her growth, her ability to handle conflict without confrontation, and her innate understanding of people. The end of the shift approached, and the cafe gradually quieted. She wiped down tables, organized supplies, and prepared for closing. There was a sense of accomplishment in the air, a subtle satisfaction that comes from a day well managed. She reflected on her journey, recognizing how far she had come from the nervous, anxious worker she had been when she first started. She had faced criticism, handled difficult situations, and asserted hers. Elf, with calm confidence, and in doing so, had gained respect not just from customers, but from coworkers and even her boss as she gathered her things to leave. The boss approached her quietly. His expression was different, less sharp, more reflective. "You handled today very well," he said, his voice low. I see the effort and skill you bring to this place. Keep it up." She nodded, feeling a mix of relief and quiet triumph. No grand apology or dramatic acknowledgement, but it was enough. Respect had been earned through consistent dedication and courage, not through confrontation. Walking home, she felt a lightness she had not experienced in a long time. She reflected on the journey, the long hours, the criticisms, the challenges, and the moments of triumph. She realized that standing up for herself had not been about proving him wrong. It had been about recognizing her own value, asserting her dignity, and cultivating her strength. She had learned that courage could be quiet, that resilience could be gentle, and that respect was earned through consistent, thoughtful action. That evening, she sat quietly in her small apartment, sipping tea and letting her mind wander. She thought about her family, about the sacrifices she had made, and about the dreams that were still ahead. She felt proud, not just of her accomplishments at the cafe, but of the person she had become, confident, calm, capable, and resilient. She understood that challenges would continue, that not every day would be easy, but she also knew she had the inner strength to face them. She reflected on the relationships she had built along the way, the trust and quiet admiration of coworkers, the appreciation of customers, and even the tentative acknowledgement from her boss. These connections, earned through patience, skill, and dignity, were more valuable than any verbal praise. They were proof that her approach, standing firm in her integrity, handling challenges with grace, and supporting those around her, was making a difference. As night fell, she allowed herself to rest fully, her mind at ease. She knew that the future held more work, more challenges, and more opportunities to demonstrate her strength. But she also knew that she had grown, that she had fought back not with anger or aggression, but with quiet courage and consistent effort. She had transformed her relationship with her work, her colleagues, and even her boss, and in doing so, had discovered a deeper sense of self-respect and empowerment before drifting to sleep. She thought of the days ahead, feeling a mix of anticipation and confidence. She knew that she could face challenges, navigate conflicts, and maintain her dignity in ways she had never imagined. And as she closed her eyes, a small smile crossed her face. She had fought back fearlessly, earned respect, and discovered the strength within herself that would guide her for the rest of her life. The journey was ongoing, but she was ready. For the first time in a long time, she felt truly at peace with who she had become.